The United States and Iran are edging closer to a wider war after American forces completed a ninth consecutive night of strikes against Iranian targets, and a third U.S. service member was confirmed killed over the weekend. This is a live, fast-developing military story. And here is what is confirmed right now. A Central Command says American forces struck a range of Iranian military targets overnight Sunday into Monday, marking the ninth straight night of strikes in the current escalation. The strikes targeted Iranian military command centers, air defense and coastal surveillance sites, maritime capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and communications networks. CENTCOM said the goal is to continue degrading Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping and civilian mariners moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Explosions were reported early Monday local time across Iran, including in coastal port cities along the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, as well as in the northwestern city of Tabriz, which Iranian state media said was struck for the first time in the current round of fighting. President Trump said Sunday night that Iran had been hit very hard, and told reporters that Iran has, in his words, lost almost everything militarily and has very little left. His comments came shortly after CENTCOM announced the ninth night of strikes and followed a weekend in which American military casualties climbed sharply, deepening fears in Washington and across the region that the conflict could spiral further. The latest American death was announced by CENTCOM on Saturday. A U.S. service member was killed and another was wounded during what CENTCOM described as a controlled detonation of unexploded ordnance from a downed Iranian one-way attack drone in northern Iraq. The wounded service member's injury was described as minor. That death came just one day after two other American service members were killed in a separate Iranian missile attack on a base in Jordan on Friday, with a third service member initially reported missing. CENTCOM said Sunday that military personnel had located and identified remains at the site of the Jordan attack, and that an examination process to verify those remains is ongoing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio addressed both incidents Sunday, telling reporters that the Iraq death was an accident that occurred as an American service member was decommissioning a downed Iranian drone. On the Jordan attack, Rubio said U.S. forces shot down almost all of the incoming missiles but that, in his words, one leaked through. He added that nothing the military does is safe, calling the work inherently dangerous, and praised what he called the heroic Americans in uniform serving their country. Saturday's death brings the total number of U.S. service members killed since the war with Iran began in February to 17. President Trump, speaking to reporters as he returned to Washington from the World Cup final on Sunday, said he feels very badly about the losses but defended the broader campaign, saying American troops are fighting to ensure Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. The fighting is also rattling U.S. allies across the region. Kuwait's armed forces said Monday they were engaging hostile drone attacks from Iran. Kuwait's fire force said firefighters and a worker were injured battling blazes sparked by Iranian strikes on the country's territory, and Kuwait's foreign ministry accused Iran of deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure. Jordan's military said its air defenses intercepted missiles aimed at its territory near Aqaba, reporting no casualties or damage there. Bahrain also reported rocket sirens sounding across the country. Separately, Britain's Maritime Authority reported a vessel on fire off the coast of Oman early Monday local time, adding to concerns about the safety of commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil transit routes. To understand how the conflict reached this point, it helps to look back at how it began. President Trump announced what he called major combat operations against Iran on February 28, ordering massive joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian military, government, and infrastructure sites. The move followed the collapse of an earlier ceasefire between Israel and Iran that had held since June of last year. In the months since, the U.S. and Iran have cycled through periods of intense strikes, temporary ceasefires, and renewed negotiations, including a memorandum of understanding signed by both governments in June aimed at ending the war. Despite that agreement and continued diplomatic contacts, the two sides have kept exchanging strikes, with the Strait of Hormuz remaining the central flashpoint because of its importance to global oil shipments. This latest escalation matters well beyond the immediate battlefield. Rising American casualties raised the political stakes for the Trump administration at home, while the expanding strikes on Iranian cities and the attacks on shipping lanes threaten to pull in more of Iran's neighbors, several of whom host American troops and infrastructure. Financial markets have also been reacting, with oil prices moving higher in recent sessions as traders weigh the risk of a prolonged disruption to Gulf shipping. Looking ahead, expect CENTCOM to continue nightly strikes against Iranian targets for the immediate future, with officials framing the campaign as an effort to degrade Iran's military capability rather than to occupy Iranian territory. Watch for further statements from the Pentagon on the American service member killed in Iraq and on the search for definitive identification of the remains found in Jordan. Diplomats say back-channel contacts around the June Memorandum of Understanding have not entirely broken down, meaning a return to ceasefire talks remains possible even as strikes continue. At the same time, continued attacks on shipping and on U.S. allies in the Gulf raise the risk of further escalation in the days ahead. As it stands this morning, U.S. Central Command is standing by its account of both American deaths, saying the Iraq incident was an accident tied to ordnance disposal and that the Jordan attack was a direct Iranian missile strike. The Iranian government has not issued a detailed public response to the specific American casualty reports, though Iranian state media has reported dozens of Iranian deaths and hundreds of injuries from the American strikes over the past several days. President Trump says the campaign will continue until Iran can no longer threaten shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. There are also signs the fight is spreading to Iran's nuclear infrastructure question again. The International Atomic Energy Agency has been looking into a reported strike on the site of Iran's unfinished Darkhovan nuclear power plant, a facility that was not previously considered a frontline target in the conflict. Any confirmed damage to nuclear-related infrastructure would likely raise the stakes further, both militarily and diplomatically. Given how central Iran's nuclear program has been to the broader dispute since the war began, financial markets are also watching closely. Oil prices have climbed in recent trading sessions as the conflict has escalated, with U.S. crude briefly trading above $80 a barrel earlier this month before pulling back. Analysts say further disruption to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, which handles roughly a fifth of the world's oil traffic, remains the single biggest risk to energy markets tied to this conflict, and Monday's reported vessel fire off Oman is likely to keep that risk in focus for traders. To summarize, the United States has now struck Iran for 9 consecutive nights. A third American service member has been confirmed killed in the escalating conflict, and unidentified remains have been found at the site of a separate deadly attack in Jordan. Explosions were reported across Iran early this morning, including for the first time in the city of Tabriz, while Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain all reported new attacks or alerts overnight, and a vessel fire was reported off the coast of Oman. This is a rapidly developing story, and we will continue to bring you verified updates as they come in.